Oh, and there's our little red square. Good morning, Wednesday, April 16th, 2025, in-house transportation this morning, and we are continuing our education of DMV. And today we're digging into, how the fuel tax works, how money flows, something I have no idea how it works. Renee, thank you very much for joining us. Your first time in committee with us?
Yes.
So we'll go around the room real quick and let you know who we are. I'm Matt Walker. I represent Swanton and Sheldon.
Tim Parker from Bennington.
Holly Burke, Brattleboro. Chloe Tomlinson from Winooski.
Jim Casey, Hubbardton, Addison, Rutland One.
Chris Keyser, Rutland City.
Candace White, Waitsfield, Warren, Mason, Moortown, and Duxbury.
Ken Wells, Barton, Orleans, Brownington, Evansville. I'm gonna leave it out, Westmore.
Phil Hodge, Heinsberg.
Yeah.
And so I'm Renee Cotto, Director of Finance at DMV, and I'd like to introduce, I have Diane Poles, who was the Director of Finance at DMV prior to me, and she is back as the Director of Policy. And Brandy Robillard, who is our Compliance Director. So she does compliance and audit.
Morning, welcome. I'm looking forward to this part.
So we have a lot for you today, and each of us are talking about different parts of it. So I'm going to do the big overview of dollars. So we're going to go over licenses, registrations, how much money, and we have a comparison from 2018 through 2025 by quarter. So you can see how the money has gone up and down by quarter, because everything it doesn't work exactly evenly. So there's high parts and low parts depending on the information. We have compliance, the purpose and functions, and compliance challenges and considerations, audit revenue, motor fuel tax overview, point of taxation, diesel fuel refunds. That's actually a part that we want to talk about a bit. IRP and IFTA and contracted services. And even though contracts, think, why are we talking about contracts? We need the contracts to bring in the revenue. So the contracts are really important because they tie to different revenue pieces. So this is the economists, what they think we're going to bring in production for the different types of revenue broken into these pieces. Gasoline taxes, TIB fund, we generally do come in fairly close, but of course it could be a little higher in some areas and a little lower in others. And this is all of what DMV brings in, not necessarily what is available for the transportation fund, because a third of purchase and use tax goes to the education fund, but it is revenue that we collect. So registrations, we have different types of registrations. And so with these, you can see that snowmobile registrations, obviously, anybody would probably assume that snowmobile registrations are going to be higher in the third quarter or the fourth quarter, very fewer in the first quarter of the year, and almost non-existent during the summertime, in the spring. But what each of these tells you is, so 2018 is the first, and 2025, we only have 2025 for quarter one, is the last. And so like for snowmobile registrations, we can see a trend that they are going down from a high point in 2018 to say like third or fourth quarter of the fourth quarter for snowmobile registrations. It has a tendency of going down. We're not registering as many, so our revenue is going down. But motorboat registrations, that seems fairly even. We do have that high point in 2018 and the second quarter, but otherwise it seems fairly even. And then vehicle registrations, those are for the 2024 seem to be on an uptick, but a little bit lower in 2025 first quarter. Yeah,
How does the impact of registering 1 year to 2 years or whatnot? Is that anywhere in the little bubbles or is that kind of, how does that?
so this isn't pulling out 1 year registrations versus 2 year registrations. This is just
Just a total of.
the total registrations, yes, but we could get that information for you.
So overall, they're all mostly trending up. Is that what we're, on the vehicle registrations are trending up, snowmobiles are trending down?
Snowmobiles are trending down, but the snowmobiles are much smaller. You know, let's see,
Much-
about 250,000 was a high point. So when you're, you know, overall, the impact for snowmobiles is not as high as the impact from vehicle registrations. Because we're looking at, you know, a high point between 15 and 20 million dollars, closer to that 15 million at this point, per quarter. So, yes, they're trending up. And that is a much higher impact than the snowmobiles trending down.
And the registration, the DMV increase in fee blip starts right at which color and goes to the next, where is the,
2024.
we go from the,
So we can see the increase in fees.
that's where the big.
Trending up.
But it is much higher. And then, okay.
So here, purchase and use tax. Purchase and use tax is, you would think that it would be as similar to vehicle registrations. We did have a real high point in 2021 in the second quarter, which seems like quite an anomaly. Otherwise, we actually are trending up, which is positive.
Well,
Well,
and, sorry,
Please do.
so a portion of that is the car prices have gone up, so that, you know, it doesn't necessarily say the number of vehicles, it's just the car prices, I would guess.
Right, so this is the revenue bringing in versus the number of vehicles.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm sure that there's a direct correlation between the car prices because our percentage is 6% of the value of the car. So yeah,
So we just saw yesterday from JFO that the first quarter of 2025, right, the revenues were March, and then they were down, right?
and that shows that here as well. It's not trending up as much in the first quarter of 25. 24 definitely was trending up compared to the other years, but 25 is down compared to 24. So
But the 24 fourth quarter was particularly high compared to the fourth quarter of 2023.
yeah, it's about $5 million higher.
So was there a spike in, I don't know, Christmas gifts or buying, or we can't tell yet, but
Well, so looking at it, comparing it quarter by quarter, is that the first quarter of the year is usually not a high point for people purchasing vehicles. They purchase vehicles in the second quarter and the third, the other 3 quarters more than they do in the first quarter of the year. So, I mean, I don't have a crystal ball, but I could envision that what wasn't purchased in the first quarter could be purchased in the second or the third quarter.
in the first quarter of 2024 was particularly high. Is
It
that
was particularly high.
the expectation of a high 2025 may have been over,
It could be.
because historically it wasn't that high.
Right, historically, it's not high. It looks like an anomaly for 2024.
Part of the reason that our JFO was talking quite a bit yesterday about not worrying about one particular month of results. I guess if you're comparing it against the previous first quarter, you're almost impossible to hit that number.
Yeah.
Okay.
When do you get worried as far as not meeting our targets? Is it too early? Yeah, I think we're off by 2 million. Like, when do you like, we might not meet this? Just based on trends, is there like, we get to like April, like we are now, when that comes in, or?
So I'm new at this.
Yeah.
Can you speak to that?
Usually we're not tracking at that level.
Yeah.
We're just doing the administration of the funds. The Agency of Transportation really has an eye on that, and we do. They're looking at that a little more closely. It impacts their budget more than it does ours, and we're just bringing the money in, making sure it's available.
Sure.
So additional revenue, sources, we have licenses and inspection stickers. So licenses, you can see that we are trending up as well, and that could very well be tied to the increased fees. That's what I would, make an assumption on. Otherwise, it is fairly, goes up a little bit, goes down, but it's trending. There isn't any big spikes. For inspection stickers, we have one really anomaly, 2018 in Q2. Otherwise, and 2022. So we have one that's really high in 2018, one that's really low in 2022. But otherwise, we are trending, I would say trending down in inspection stickers. Why that's the case, I wouldn't want to speculate.
Even though the fee went up, we don't see that bump up above everything else. Right, the inspection fee, went up.
I don't
The
think so.
inspection fee was part of the DMV fee?
No, I don't think so.
I don't,
It wasn't?
I don't, I don't.
I don't
maybe,
think I don't think our fee went up. So we would be collecting it, would be the number of vehicles that are getting inspected or waiting to get inspected. One thing that I did notice, is that in the past with our old inspection sticker, if you had an 8, no, never mind, that was the wrong thing. I was thinking of registrations. So registration, there is one difference in registrations. This is a thought I was having, is that in the past, if you were scheduled to be registered in March and you waited until June and you registered your vehicle, it was then still March. Now it's June. So there is that potential that people will put off once they realize they'll put off to get another month or two or and move it like you can do with the inspection stickers.
I think we had some anecdotal testimony last year about, in perhaps pandemic, perhaps the fact that, law enforcement isn't as critical, that the number of inspection stickers overdue has gone up. And I think some of us even walked around the parking lot and looked around, and it's easy to find cars with overdue inspection stickers.
And when I was speaking with the economist, probably 2 Decembers ago, I shared that my eye is now drawn to the fact that there are cars that are not inspected in a lot of lots. I actually, it's like, oh. So it's gone up, and if there's no enforcement, we know what happens.
Yeah,
People, if they're not being watched,
and I would say the same with registration. If you like your registration, I mean, I would say anecdotally, 20 years ago, I mean, I would be frightened to do that. Today, you're not gonna get pulled over, there's less enforcement on the street.
That registration fee, I'm sorry, go ahead. After what?
I just question on, and this is not my original idea, but someone brought this up yesterday. Do we have numbers on number of vehicles registered in Vermont versus number of inspections in Vermont in a calendar year to understand how many are not getting inspected?
We have not pulled that information, but it is definitely something that we're looking into. But I don't have that information currently, but we could potentially get it.
I'd be interested in that. Thank you.
The renewal registration, when you said if you had to run out in February and you mail it in March, April, May, several months later, it used to go back to the time that it terminated, and now it just starts a new 12-month. Was that a administrative decision within the DMV? Is that a law-related decision? Is that what drove that, and when did that happen? When did that change in policy happen?
I don't know that answer.
could you repeat the question?
I thought I understood from the testimony that when the registration comes in, whether it's online or mailed in, when they process it, if it were the registration had run out at the end of a month and in January and you didn't mail it in until March or April, your new registration would start from the moment you purchased it, April going forward. It wouldn't go back to, and it used to go back to when you were supposed to have paid it. In effect, So we might lose 2 months worth of revenue, or you were unregistered for 2 months. However, you may have parked the car for the summer. I don't know. You might have waited, but it used to be a policy that apparently that it went back, and now we have a policy that it starts forward. So do we know what drove it and when that happened?
I believe what drove it was the implementation of UT trips in the fall of November 23, when we changed over the system. Because it used to be on the mainframe, and it was a hard fix. And I think it's systematically, that's what drove that. Now it's when you actually do the transaction that it calculates it for a year, regardless of if it expired 3 months prior. So that is a revenue leak.
Okay.
How significant, we're not sure yet.
Be nice to get that data. It'd be nice to get the data of registrations versus inspections, maybe. Yeah,
You know, since we visually can see non-inspection at this
Yeah.
point, we can't see non-registration because the stickers don't exist anymore.
If, I'm sorry, so inspections didn't, that inspection fee was not part of the DMV fee rollout, right? Inspection, okay. If, without the fee increase, which is what the green line on the right is, if I look at the first quarter, it kind of bounces up and down, but second is obviously a trend down, and third is obviously a trend down, and fourth is pretty much a trend down. So license renewal were trending down for over the last 7 years. Is that what this tells me? So that the number of renewals was going down. The DMV fee increase helped the dollars get back up to where they, well, a little bit above where they've been for all the way back to 2018, but we can infer that the number of actual activities are down.
So now we're gonna move on to the compliance portion, and Brandy Robillard will be speaking to this.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm pleased to be here. Take it easy. This is the first time I've ever testified in front of you. I did have the young lady in back print this so I could see my notes, because when we're sharing our screen, I can't see my notes, and I'm a note taker, so it helps me stay on task. So compliance and purpose, the purpose really is to ensure a fair and accurate way to administer our DMV laws and our regulations through an ongoing monitoring and auditing effort, followed by enforcement activities. This really is in a mindset of making an even playing field for all of our members. The key objectives is to protect state revenue by ensuring the accurate amount of fees and taxes being reported by all, to promote a fair competition by all of registrants and holding them all by the same standards. To enhance public safety through proper registration and enforcement activities. And one of my favorite is to support transparency and accountability. And it is done through DMV operations. Compliance challenges. There's always ongoing challenges and considerations to be thinking about. Preventing registration fraud is a top one. This can happen when individual, I might say carrier or registrants, or individuals, they can provide false addresses. They can create shell companies, and that can lead to underreporting by their mileage or underreporting fuel consumption or gallons. And it's something that I see when I look at data, and it can be inconsistent data based on what people provide. Audit revenue. The purpose of conducting audits, again, is directly tied to compliance and maintaining revenue. The type of audits that the DMV currently administer are rail, rental company licenses, IRP, IFTA, motor fuel tax, and diesel refunds. As you can see from the chart above, we've had a little bit of activity start in 2024. And the reason for that is from 2021 to 2022, we had one auditor. And I was hired in 2023 as an auditor. And then I have recently moved into being the compliance division director. And I am happy to report, as of right now, we are currently staffed and we have 3 auditors to help us maintain a quota that we're required to administer by the federal IRP and IFTA plans. And you can see that in 2024, we conducted a lot of IRP audits. We internally focused on a discovery program that resulted in us meeting our quota, which is to conduct 3% of both IFTA and IRP audits for all of our registered carriers. So in 2024, we met that, and we're on track to meeting that again in 2025. And I'm looking forward to seeing what our auditors can do and make an even playing field for our registered
Person,
Remind me again what IRP and IFTA.
Sure. So IRP stands for International Registration Plan.
Okay.
And IFTA stands for, look at my notes. I have that on another slide. I apologize. So make sure I get it absolutely correct. International Federal Tax Administration.
Thank you.
Yep. Motor fuel tax overview. Currently, the gasoline tax is 32.61 cents per gallon of gasoline. Diesel fuel, this is clear diesel, it's 32 cents per gallon. There's a petroleum distributor licensing fee of 1 cent per gallon on petroleum distributors who sell heating oil, kerosene, and other products such as dyed fuel. Transportation, the MFTIA is an additional 6.1 cent per gallon applied to the sales of gasoline. The MFTAF is a fee that's calculated at 4% of the state average retail price of gasoline and collection of 13.4 cents per gallon. Here you'll see some additional, some additional graphs for gasoline tax and diesel tax. Again, it's broken down by quarter, and we have data from 2018 to 2025. This reflects actual data in the moment of when we collected it. So these are your pump sales. Motor fuel, how many are you familiar with what the taxation, point of taxation is for motor fuel?
this is new to me.
Okay, so Vermont is considered what you would say is an above the rack state because we don't have a pipeline. We don't accept fuel in by a barge. We don't get it in by pipeline. So the only ways for us to get fuel into our state currently is by an 18-wheeler, a truck, or a railroad rail car. We have in Burlington, Vermont, we have a terminal, which is then where the fuel comes in from all points of entry into our state. And so from this diagram, you see where the terminal is, and you can see like storage tanks, the one in green, and then the one in red. They can be above the ground, they can be in the ground. I personally have not done the tour of this terminal, but Renee has, and I have seen them in other states with the, and then the rack is where the fuel is actually dispensed from. So it comes from the terminal, the storage facility tank, and then it is put into a truck or a rail car. And then it moves in 2 ways. It goes to a wholesaler, which is also known as a distributor, somebody who's acting as the carrier and is moving the fuel from point A to point B. And then B would be the retailer, where we go as consumers and we buy the fuel.
Representative Cook?
So is the entire state serviced through Burlington, or I thought that some in the south came right from Albany? Albany, because they have a huge.
I believe they do. I just have not seen it. The
terminals, I
main
guess,
one
right.
that I'm aware of is in Burlington.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
I think they.
Our fuel.
Yeah,
Albany.
if you want any
Yeah.
clarification, Albany supplies everything typically below Middlebury. We also have product that comes up on the eastern side of the state out of Springfield and also out of Montreal.
Yes.
And so a lot, the rail terminal that you're speaking of in Burlington is owned by one particular company. And there's multiple companies around the state that have, you'll also see in Rutland and several other places where you have rail terminals where large volumes of fuel come in on rail and go there, and then people go to the rack and get them and go around.
You are correct. There are definitely multiple points of entry coming into our state. Mr. Wells and I come from the very northern part of Vermont, and there's a lot of rail cars. I'm sure you've seen them growing in Orleans and other parts. So, yes.
So where do you find out about each amount? Where does the tax happen? It doesn't happen at the retail level, does it? Are you understanding? Or is that's where we're headed? All right. Because it sounded like if it all came into one spot, that'd make it a lot easier, but it doesn't. So how does that work?
The point of taxation occurs when the fuel is first transferred or sold from above the rack before it is distributed to the wholesaler or the retailers. At this moment, the fuel becomes subject to tax. So let's say you were at the terminal in Burlington and you're the wholesaler and you buy the fuel. You go there with a pedal truck, you go there with an 18-wheeler and you buy that fuel and you're selling it to a gas station. You are paying the tax when you pick that fuel up, and then you are delivering it to the gas station. The tax has been paid. And so when the consumer goes to the gas pump and they're paying for their gallons of gas or diesel, the tax is already paid.
What if I bring that 18-wheeler in from Canada?
So if you take an 18-wheeler and you go to Canada and then you're coming back to Vermont with it, that tax is paid when you pick it up in Canada and you're bringing it and you're putting it in Vermont. And you're putting it into a retail
So
location.
the amount of gallons that loaded into that 18-wheeler is tracked at Montreal, and you somehow
In Montreal.
take a report of that, or
I have seen bill of ladings and documentation of that, yes.
do they self-report that tax to you, or that's what the audit system is part of? How do you?
We have with our new system with Fast Enterprises, we have what we call a data cube, and it does track by bill of lading, and it does track all of the gallons based on the returns that are provided to motor fuel retailers, the dealers. They have to report every month what they have sold for gallons, and it's on a very elaborate scheduling system. So then I can track what fuel by bill of lading in gallons have been sold and to whom. So I am looking at that, and then I am tracking that on a quarterly basis. I look to that. I also make sure that who they are selling for. So like the company in Montreal, the company in Rutland, or the company in Burlington, that they are selling to licensed distributors. Because to carry and move that fuel in our state, you do have to be a licensed distributor.
And how many licensed distributors are there in Vermont?
I do not know the number off the top of my head, but I can give you.
100, 200, 500?
I wouldn't know that data because I wasn't prepared to give that to you, but I can definitely look for that this afternoon and I can email that to the committee.
Great.
When you mentioned that the tax is paid when the wholesaler picks it up, that's only you're not talking about all the tax, right? Just sort of like the tip tax.
Yes,
Fixed tax, is at the retail portion, right?
yes, I'm talking about the state excise taxes.
Yeah. So the tip fund, okay.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make clear that if we did increase the gas taxes, it would be at the retail, it wouldn't be at the wholesale.
Yes.
How long do they have to remit it from the time they pick it up to the time it comes off the rack, I guess is the term?
So they are filing their returns monthly. So if they do something this month, it's due, and then return it's due by the 25th of the following month. So we also did a slide a little bit about the diesel refunds, and this is where I might have Renee come up to do some talking. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
So diesel refunds, we have, so it's about on-road fuel, so clear diesel. So some vehicles have, like a refrigerated truck, they have some diesel that they use to make the truck cold. And that is used for non-propulsion use. So I don't know how much you know about propulsion versus non-propulsion. Okay, so yep, okay, so I'll talk about propulsion versus non-propulsion and then get into their diesel refunds. So propulsion would be to propel a equipment or a vehicle forward. Non-propulsion would be, if it was a piece of equipment, it would be the bucket, using the bucket, or an excavator to do an excavator, or in the
Generator. Yeah.
generator, yep. Or like the refrigeration part of a refrigerated truck, or for as another example, a cement truck. So the turning to keep the cement from so that's non-propulsion use. So what happens is for the vehicles that are on the road, that they have the ability to request a refund for the non-propulsion use of the on-road tax that they have purchased. But with that, there is a requirement that if it's taxable, because there are some non-taxable uses, but if it's taxable, to then pay the tax department 6% on that non-propulsion use. Yes. So we currently do not have a mechanism, but we are working to getting a mechanism between the DMV and the tax department to be able to verify that, yes, indeed, the 6% sales tax has been remitted. And so when we're giving out those refunds. So we would give the refund for the entire amount, but in conjunction, they're supposed to report that 6% tax. That is possibly an area where we do not have compliance. So that's just talking.
Representative Riley's got a question for you.
I'm just trying to understand, so are they're getting a refund on the tax into transportation sector, but then they have to pay it to another part of our state?
Yes.
Okay. So we're losing that 6% in our sector.
Well, not 6%. We're losing the 32, is it 32 cents a gallon?
Yes.
32 cents a gallon.
Okay.
So it's two different taxes.
Okay.
So we're losing the 32 cents a gallon because under the law, non-propulsion is not taxable for road taxes
Okay.
right? The 32 cents a gallon for non-propulsion use. It's only when propelling the tax is due. So then the tax is not due. They deserve a refund is required. But under other laws for non-propulsion use, taxable non-propulsion use, because there is some non-taxable non-propulsion use. But for taxable non-propulsion use, 6% sales tax is required.
So I guess I'm trying to understand the two tallying up systems, the 30. What is there a way to say like what this means in real money?
We don't have the data. I'm hoping at some point we have the data, but currently we do not have the data.
So cement truck, they're gonna pay the diesel tax for transportation. Then they come back and say a portion of this, 5%, I don't know. Portion of this was to turn the truck, to run that big cement mixer. And on that, they're supposed to pay sales tax for that. And that's the sort of thing you're working on. How do you really make sure that happens? And then when you say there are people who don't pay any tax, like farmers, right? They don't pay the diesel, off-road, they don't pay the diesel tax and they don't pay the sales tax.
So farmers aren't exempt because they're farmers. They're exempt for certain activities. So that's a more complicated, definitely more complicated. Everyone is subject to tax on our highways. So whether you're state of Vermont, a town, if it's on road, there is no exemption. So everybody has to pay tax for their on the road. Yes. So then we have the diesel refunds, and we don't have at the moment a mechanism, although we are working on an MOU with the tax department to be able to get the information that we need. It may
Is anybody paying the 6%?
We are.
Some people I would say are probably paying the 6%, yes. But I would say that, you know, with all compliance, not 100% of people are following the laws to the letter.
It might be good to get the data. I mean, it sounds like all you have to do is say how much of the diesel, how many gallons came in and how many gallons are paid, but maybe it's much more complicated.
So just, I don't have the data yet, but with diesel fuel refunds, we have been working with the attorney at the tax department to obtain the MOU. And I am in the early stages of implementing an internal audit discovery program that is going to focus solely on diesel fuel refunds. What we have allowed as a DMV to go out our door and refund. So it's a matter of not knowing what the right hand is doing, and I am going to be auditing the DFR refunds. And if I audit this and I find that they were not eligible for said refund, I'm going to bill them back what they were issued in a refund plus penalties and interest. And that will also in turn into an exchange of information to the tax department. So as a referral to let them know that they, you know. So we will gain compliance, but it's going to start with the internal discovery program that I'm implementing at this time. And so this time next year, I'll have more of that data for you.
Thank you.
And so then there's dyed diesel. So we want to talk about dyed diesel a little bit. So dyed diesel is not to be used on the road, but it can be used for propulsion use and non-propulsion use. And so that gets a little trickier. Dyed diesel, there are no, so we don't at DMV tax dyed diesel, but what we have found is that there are people that are using the dyed diesel for propulsion use. They're pulling up to the, we've seen with enforcement that they're pulling up to the pumps and they are filling up their vehicles and driving on our roads with dyed diesel.
Representative Nicole?
Why would you dye diesel? I don't know, like what's dyed diesel?
Oh,
I don't know.
I can explain that. So we have clear diesel and dyed diesel. Clear diesel is our road diesel. Dyed diesel is used in multiple functions. It's to denote, so if our enforcement team dipped a vehicle, they could see that it's dyed and no road taxes have been paid. So dyed diesel is used for heating fuel. So a homeowner would get deliveries and it's dyed. So it has a red dye in it. Also, farmers often use dyed diesel for equipment. And other people using dyed diesel for different types of equipment, whether it's logging equipment or it's someone doing, you know, contractors. Dyed diesel is often used in the generators so that they don't have to request that diesel refund for that non-propulsion use. They can just buy the dyed diesel. Dyed diesel.
Like,
So
it's
it's
an operator.
So it's just dyed, so whoever enforcement knows that they don't need to have,
No road taxes.
no road taxes are needed. Okay.
But
It doesn't change the diesel makeup at all. It's diesel fuel.
Correct.
Regardless of whether it's dyed or.
yes, but on dyed diesel, 6% sales tax at the tax department is due. And there's two ways of getting that. There's the first way, which is you can deliver it to places. And so there's an exemption certificate that's available, you know, for the propulsion use, because dyed diesel isn't subject to sales tax for propulsion use. That's exempt. But it is taxable for non-propulsion use. So again, those excavators, there's a portion that is taxable for the tax department and a portion that's not taxable. But for us, we find that there are people, you know, using dyed diesel for vehicles on the road. So that is road taxes that we're losing if they find that they can skirt around that. So then there's dyed diesel at the pump. And under state statute, that's taxable at the pump. it's not being taxed at the.
So, for my tractor, I could go to the station, the local station, and fill up 5-gallon cans of dyed diesel. But nobody really knows what I'm using it for. And I should be paying 6%, but I don't know if it's in there or not.
It's like,
It's not, okay.
All the way now, or?
Representative White.
Representative Philip Couch.
Representative White.
I just want to clarify this. This is kind of out of my normal knowledge base. Okay, the only difference between diesel and dyed diesel is that dyed diesel has a dye in it. Otherwise, it functions exactly the same. And dyed diesel, you can buy at a gas station. It is not taxed at the gas station,
It currently is not being taxed at the gas station,
but
the
people,
6%
but
tax.
people are responsible. We are expecting people to be responsible for paying that 6% sales tax at a later date,
So.
would Representative Couch need to put this on his
to
taxes that he's been using this for his tractor?
use tax, yes. For the non-propulsion.
Never should have brought it up.
For the non-propulsion use, not the propulsion use. So the propulsion use is exempt, and the non-propulsion use is taxable. Under the 6% sales tax, yeah.
So is the idea that you pull up to the gas station, you're filling up the equipment on your trailer, you're filling up the off-road vehicles that you'd be using, et cetera, you're not putting it in the gas tank of the vehicle that hauled the trailer in there? Is that kind of what we're looking at? That's what's the idea of the expectation? You're
So
not loading, you're not putting it directly into the car or the truck that's driving away.
I can't speak to what the majority of what is happening. I do know that people would go to that pump and fill up 5-gallon. Or whether it's for their tractor.
Okay.
Or say they ran out of fuel for home heating because they weren't on direct, for whatever reason, and they need to put in 5 gallons. Those are all definitely things that happen. Also, things that happen would be a contractor pulling up and filling up a 200-gallon tank on their trailer
Oh.
and taking it home because they know that it's not being taxed, using it for propulsion, non-propulsion use, maybe putting it in their own vehicles. That's happening.
Are they still required to pay the 6%?
They are.
So why don't we just tax the 6% at the pump?
That's what the law says.
Can we change the law?
We
That way
can, that's
everybody's
the tax
legal
department.
Maybe that's where they're hinting at.
Okay, get a chance to ask your question.
I was kind of headed in down the same path that Representative McCoy was, so, that would seem like that would be, Ways and Means jurisdiction to make that call. Okay, and I guess I was also, so you are aware that there's some gaming of the system happening. Do you have a sense for, how much of that is going on? I mean, what are we leaving on the table here?
I don't know how much is going on. I know that we are looking, so one opportunity is to be dipping tanks with our enforcement team. I think that Brandy, you could probably speak to some of what we've been looking into.
Yes, so I also do a lot of work with the Federal Tax Administration for the motor fuel sector, and I go to a lot of conferences to get education on what other jurisdictions are doing and what their enforcement teams are doing. And a lot of other states have roadside equipment and supplies, so our officers wear body cam, so everything is recorded in the moment. And it's a supply apparatus that would go into the fuel tank, and it really like almost like a candle lit, and it comes out, it's either clear or it's pink or red. And if it's pink or red, then there can be fine. And if it's your first offense, it's X dollars. I don't know currently in the statute what it is, but what other states will do, your first fine, it's X amount. Second fine, it's a higher amount. Third and fourth after that, it's higher and higher. And after so many, it goes from being a misdemeanor to a higher, it goes to be a felony, yes. But I do know that other states bring in quite a bit of revenue from fines because it's definitely something that's happening. I myself have witnessed a contractor in my area pull up, have a trailer behind him and fill up 250 gallons worth of fuel. And I brought that back to my enforcement team and said, please look at this. But we don't have anything right now where we could test it. So it is happening. It's a way to avoid paying tax, the road tax that everybody else is paying when they go to the pump and they buy clear fuel.
So, having been in this business, it is extremely complicated. And, you needed a lot of human resources to keep track of everything that you're asking the distributor to do. Can you tell us, what the requirement is in Canada as far as guide?
I cannot give testimony. to
It's
that.
just the opposite from Vermont, from the United States. In other words, red diesel is taxable diesel and clear diesel is just the opposite. So if you dip a tank from a
Stop right there. You're gonna confuse the heck.
You're saying when you cross the border, you're in the exact opposite of compliant? Sorry,
If you-
my bad.
So I just want to illustrate how absolutely arcane the system is, but it's what we have.
Mhm.
And it works. After a lot of effort.
So is the cleanest thing to do, just from where we sit right now, to just start gathering that tax at the pump? I mean, and just be done with it, and then we've got that revenue coming in, okay. All right. And so that's in the pipeline, no pun
Yeah,
intended.
that is not,
Are you a bona fide?
I would not say
Or not?
that is in the pipeline, that is a tax department. That has to come from the tax department.
Guys in trouble here.
Yeah.
What are we calling it?
Okay.
I didn't know that.
Okay, so the reason that Brandy and I know that is because we were at the tax department for 14 years. And now we're at DMV.
That's good.
Very helpful. So the next slide is what's taxed or not taxed for on road. So gasoline and diesel are taxed at the road taxes. That's how I, think about it, the road taxes versus the 6% sales tax. Untaxed in terms of thinking about it as road taxes, electricity, as I'm sure all know, is not taxed with the 32 cents because it doesn't work out that way. Dyed diesel, obviously it's illegal. You're not allowed to use it on the road, but propane also is being used as a propulsion fuel for vehicles and is not being taxed. Going to bring this back to Brandy.
Before I dive into IRP, do you have questions on any of the untaxed resources I could?
I was just curious what vehicles ride on the roads that are filled by propane.
I oversee the commercial vehicle unit, and I can tell you that there are commercial fleet vehicles, so your 18-wheelers that are being, or like some 10-wheeler trucks that might deliver food and stuff that are being run by propane.
And I think propane delivery trucks tend to
Yeah.
run on propane.
So that is an area where, they're on the roads, they're heavy vehicles, they're commercial, and they are not paying the same taxes as maybe their competitor because their competitor is still using diesel.
Commissioner Paul, you're welcome this morning. Did I hear that we wanted to phone a friend over here today?
I will just mention that, in high school and also, Andrew Collier, Commissioner DMV, corrected. You can convert a diesel engine to propane as well. So I know there's, 1 ton or half ton, quarter-ton vehicles that are running on propane as well.
Excuse me.
So IRP stands for International Registration Plan. It's an agreement among the United States, the District of Columbia, and several Canadian provinces that allow commercial motor carriers to operate jurisdictionally. IRPs are distributed to member jurisdictions based on the distance that they traveled in each jurisdiction. IRP helps to streamline commercial vehicle registration to ensure that the state, district, or province gets the fair appropriated amount of fees based on the distance that they have traveled in each state. How does IRP revenue impact Vermont? Fees are collected through the IRP to help fund various road maintenance and improvement projects. IRP ensures that the state is reimbursed using a financial clearinghouse that's provided by IRP. So that's basically like the checkbook that disperses the funds to all the different jurisdictions. IRP supports the flow of various goods by making it easier for trucking companies to operate across different state lines. It benefits by boosting our trade, and it reduces delays, and it attracts other freight companies to our state. Why is IRP important to Vermont? Again, it supports the interstate commerce. It's a streamlined regulation, which makes it easier for truckers so they don't have to have a registration in every single state that they travel through. And it evenly disperses the revenue.
How do they keep track of the miles? Is this something they just manually do, or is there a tracker on these trucks, or?
As of January 1st of 2024, there was a ballot passed by IRP that requires all truckers to basically have a GPS in their vehicle. And it's an e-log. And if your truck is older than that, then there's ways that you're not grandfathered. They expect you to do something like with a cell phone and GPS, but it is to every 15 minutes, they want it to ping with a lat and a long, and it maps out the entire route of that truck. And with the GPS, it even will let you know when that vehicle's idling, or like, if it's at the shop and it's just moving a little bit around while it's getting repaired. I mean, that's all there. So it's heavily monitored and it's tracked closely. And in the event of an audit, they have to provide that level of documentation, and the auditors are looking at that and they're verifying it to what they reported versus to what they have for individual driver's logs and what their GPS data says.
I could see MBUF sort of evolving into something.
Yeah. So is the GPS data go to the driver and they make a log, or does the GPS data go somewhere else and somebody says, oh?
Well, I hope the truck drivers aren't writing while they're driving.
No.
No, I see a lot of times in the event of the audit is the electronic data is kept kind of like up into the cloud, and the reports are run monthly. Sometimes then the driver's logs are kept by the drivers and they use them for like weekly payroll purposes, and that data is tied back and cross-examined back in the office. And they review all of that before they file their IRP registration.
So my question is, somebody is moving the money around to the different states based on how many miles in each state.
The DMV will collect the registration fees based on the distance that they are reporting to us. And then that money goes to the clearinghouse, and the clearinghouse disperses that money based on the miles in those jurisdictions.
All right, so they're the ones. And so my question, maybe you don't know, and I don't know if it's really that important, is the people who are distributing the money, are they getting the GPS data directly, or is it the truckers reporting, here's what I did last month?
It is the truckers that are reporting.
Yeah, thanks.
Yep. What is IFTA? IFTA is the International Fuel Tax Agreement. It's an agreement among the lower 48 states and Canadian provinces that, like IRP, it simplifies fuel tax reporting for interstate motor carriers. It allows these carriers to file a single quarterly fuel tax return with their base jurisdiction, which then will distribute, similar to IRP and a clearinghouse, the appropriate taxes to the other jurisdictions based upon distance traveled and fuel gallons consumed. And they too are required to keep similar records as IRP. They have to keep their distant records, which then turn into driver's logs and GPS reports, but they're also required to keep detailed fuel. They have to keep all of their receipts to show where their fuel was purchased. It has to categorize by what truck, because you've got a lot of fleets that have multiple trucks, so they need to know what fuel is going into what truck. And if they buy all of their fuel and they have that fuel delivered to a stock tank at their shop, they need to keep very detailed records on how that fuel was dispensed into what vehicle it's put in, because they're not pulling into a gas station and doing it at a gas station. Why is IFTA important? As a member of IFTA, Vermont benefits because of the following examples. It's simplified tax administration. Vermont is its home-based carrier of the operation throughout multiple jurisdictions. They can file one consolidated return. Again, for truckers, I couldn't imagine what it would be like if you had to file 48 different returns. You just wouldn't have time to do anything, right? It's a revenue allocation system. The department collects the fuel taxes and ensures that we are appropriately distributing it to the other jurisdictions using the clearinghouse. And it's a compliance and enforcement measure. We set the framework for auditing and compliance, and we help ensure that all the carriers are paying the same amount of fuel taxes. IFTA matters because it prevents carriers from being taxed multiple times or incorrectly across our borders. And it helps ensure a fair playing field for the tax that we collect and how we distribute it.
So it seems like if I was a trucker going across the country and then, I don't know how much you buy at one time, 400 gallons, I don't know. You would buy that at the state. If you could get to the next state and there's less tax paid, that's where you buy it. So this really doesn't matter that you've done that. The state you bypassed will still get some of the tax.
Yes.
To account for the road use.
Yes. But in the event of an audit, it's important for us to make sure that they have the records to support that they did buy that fuel in the other state with the lower tax, to make sure that they're not trying to avoid and get a refund when they're not due. And like IRP, we're required to do 3% of our IFTA carriers for the entire year. And in 2024, we met that. And we're on track for meeting that again this year. I believe we're actually going to bypass that with a fully staffed audit team.
Representative Case?
It's probably hypothetical at this point. Do you have plans for electric vehicles? Does anybody, or electric trucks, big, huge trucks? They have, I don't even know if there's one on the road yet, is there?
There actually is. We don't in Vermont have a high presence of electric, but we do have more propane. Something at the end of the slide that I was going to bring up is in legislature opportunities, and that talks about how you guys set definitions of what a commercial vehicle is, what approach, what would qualify for that, but also like how Vermont defines fuel. So what the technical definition of fuel is something that we would need to look at, seeing what other jurisdictions do. They set that as very broad because we don't know what the future is going to bring and what fuel sources may be used to propel a vehicle on the road. So right now, currently propane isn't being taxed, electricity isn't being taxed. So that would then turn into how much tax revenue we're bringing in for diesel and gas.
Okay.
Well, so now we're fully staffed, we're doing the audits for Vermont or the other 48 states in Canada. What's the percentage of audit failures? I mean, how much is really out there that's not being captured, or are the audits just showing, hey, people are doing what they're supposed to be doing?
I don't have the exact percentage. I can get that for you. I can tell you that in the last 2 years, there are audits that are considered no changes because an auditor, will go in and they will review all of the same records, and the carrier is doing it correctly and there are no assessments found. But that being said, there's also assessments that are being found. Our mission with the DMV is not really set on ROI, but we are heavily focused on compliance and education and making sure that our carriers are educated and they have the tools to be successful. So it's a healthy mix of both, but I could get you the percentage.
And then the auditor salary, the program to do this, sounds like 3 auditors or, that is coming right out of our state funds, but it's required to be a member of this sort of national.
Yes, we are required to make that 3%. So currently, I just went through an IFTA peer review where Vermont is audited every 5 years for both IFTA and IRP compliance. And before that, we had findings because we weren't meeting our 3%. So I have a backlog that we will have to make up in the next 4 years in addition to our 3%. So here is a little bit of the statistics on Vermont revenue on how it plays in for 2018 to 2025. And you can see broken down by quarter, it stays pretty consistent. And everybody has, different jobs and contracts that they're working on. And so again, it goes by distance and where they are traveling and where they're working. But overall, I think we stay pretty consistent.
Seems a little more volatile in the second quarter than it does in the third and the fourth.
Yeah,
What drives that?
Winter.
I'm sorry, I
The
couldn't.
weather drives that in the second quarter, February, or what?
Yeah.
April, May, June. April, May, June. No. So the reports after them, you report after the quarter? Is that right?
Yeah, it's so like your activities report the following
So
month.
your quarter two is really your activity from quarter one,
Yes.
and quarter one is really the fourth quarter activity? Okay. So that weather idea. Be the
And
one in
with our seasons in Vermont,
one
the
in
construction,
still be the winter. I got you. Dollar figures up the left side. Whole area of DMV, we get no idea what was going on.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Where are we at? Oh.
I'll leave it real.
Great questions, great questions.
Uh-oh.
So, yeah, so updating definitions, what is an apportioned vehicle, definition of fuel, supporting fraud prevention and enforcement authority. And opportunities would be to improve compliance with streamlined laws, modernize vehicle registration systems, and enhance transparency and sharing.
Representative White and then Representative Pouch.
I'm just curious about some data on the fraud prevention and enforcement. How much fraud are you finding? Is that resulting in fees that kind of pay for the
investigation or the
process?
audit?
Yeah, you guys having to go through the audits and the investigations and so forth. I mean, just how prevalent is it?
I don't have the data broken down by percentages. And I, in the 2 years that I have been at the DMV, and not have seen a case that has been labeled as fraud, but I have seen areas where people have provided records to skirt around having to report certain data to get a credential. Maybe they provided something that they shouldn't have to try to get an IFTA decal or an IFTA decal, or they didn't provide enough documentation to support what they received for a refund on the IFTA side. And then it does result in assessment with penalties and interest that are assessed according to statute. But I have not seen an audit finding where fraud penalties have been assessed in the 2 years that I've been at the DMV. Is it possible? Yes, but I have not seen it yet. I just see a wide mix of carriers that are not keeping the appropriate records that they need to support what they have filed.
Okay, so we're not seeing any penalties, any financial penalties.
Not directed to a fraud assessment, no.
Okay. And are, so faulty paperwork or, is that cause for concern? Is that, how important is it to identify that someone has faulty paperwork? Like, are they making an error? Are they trying to get something over on the state? Yeah, I'm
not really sure that I can answer your question. I think I'd have to go back and I'd look through my completed audits to be able to answer you with a percentage or an assessment dollar amount to be able to clearly define what you're asking. I'm sorry, I don't have that information.
I guess I'm just trying to understand what's the goal of the fraud investigation? If we're not,
To ensure that,
Coming up with-
you know, I want to ensure that everybody that actually is licensed as an IRP and an IFTA carrier, that they're a resident of Vermont. That's important. I wouldn't want somebody to be like what IRP and IFTA classifies as a chameleon carrier to say that they're a Vermont resident to obtain that licensure with us and then not live here because then they're not paying the taxes that they should be. They might choose to do that over the state that they technically reside in because our tax rate might be lower. But I haven't seen that yet. Is it likely that it's happening? Yes, I just haven't seen it.
A couple quick questions, I guess. The IRP and IFTA, the rules for those, are they in state law? Or are they in federal law? Or, you know, so where do they reside? I haven't read any of it in our state laws. That's one question, and you know, maybe you don't know the answer. Then my next one was are you aware of other states that are charging propane as transportation fuel and or electricity? And are there, you know, best practices we could look at? So those are two questions.
So to answer your first question, certain aspects of IFTA and IRP are defined in our statute under DMV on Title 23. But we follow the plans put out by IFTA and IRP. So I can send you the direct links so you can have access to those, so you can review those as well. And all of that also will give you the ballots that they pass, which change their plans annually. And then, yes, I am aware of states that tax both electricity and propane. There's a lot of people that follow California and what California does, but their infrastructure is vastly different than Vermont. And so I've been paying closer attention to like how Pennsylvania is treating the taxation of electricity and propane. And I have a contact with Pennsylvania that I communicate with regularly. And if he was willing to share some of that information, I could get that to you as well.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Why'd you pick Pennsylvania?
Because they're closer to us than California. And when I've gone to some of these FTA conferences, I've had very good conversations with him. And that the way that they tax electricity and propane has benefited to be good for Pennsylvania. It's helped them streamline things and get a good grasp on how they're handling those types of vehicles.
When you're talking electricity, you're talking about electric vehicles, right?
18-wheelers, yes.
Like 18-wheelers, okay.
Yeah, I'm talking IFTA and IRP, which is your carriers. And now I'm going to hand it over to Diane Coles with Contracted Services.
Is this a good time to take a break?
It's probably a good time to take a break.
I don't even see it. I see a clock here.
So
So
we're going to adjourn for this session, and then we'll come back at 10:30-ish and start up.